Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will be starting shortly. If you have any questions or technical issues, please do let me know, and we will be beginning in just a little bit here. We're just waiting for some more people to join. Thank you, everyone that's here. If there's any questions, you can please feel free to put them in the chat to me. Thank you. Hi, if you have a question, I see your hand up. It's muted on your part. So Roop, I see your hand up, and I cannot hear you though. Your microphone's on mute. And Lindsay also.
Hi there. Sorry, I just wasn't getting in, so I wanted to make sure it wasn't on my end.
No, everything's good. You're here. Are you able to see me on the screen? I'm going to share the PowerPoint intro slide in just a minute. So please, you can send me a chat message or anything if something's not working.
Oh, thank you so much. It's all good. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I apologize for the technical issues that many of you have been having. We will be starting momentarily. I do apologize. We just added a new Zoom module, and I think there's some hiccups on the back end, but everything should be ready to go in just a little bit. If you can't see the screen, if you're having trouble logging in, if there's any other issues, please send me a quick email and I will help you get through that. You should be able to see my Welcome to the Care for Caregiver webinar series screen right now. If there's any issues or I've gotten some emails already, I will help you walk through it and hopefully resolve the issues. Again, I do apologize if there's any issues going on right now. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I apologize for the delay and some participants are having some issues joining and connecting. We're just sorting all of that out. I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Kaval Mahmood. I'm with Safe Care BC, and I'm working on the Care for Caregivers program. I think I've sorted out all of the issues that were sent to me or anybody that was having trouble connecting and joining. So that should be everyone that was having any difficulties should be sorted. If you can't see my screen, again, if you can't hear, if you have trouble logging in, you can definitely send me an email. I know a lot of people have been doing that, so thank you. And I apologize again if there's any technical issues going on. I'll definitely make sure we sort these out for next time. So again, welcome to the Care for Caregivers webinar series. Thank you for joining us. This session is being recorded and it will be available after the session on the Care for Caregivers website under our resources section. And as many of you know, today's topic is Sick and Tired, a conversation about stress and fatigue. This session will address the relationship between stress and fatigue and how to maintain your health and relationships. And we have a wonderful speaker. I'm really excited to introduce her. So thank you for joining us, everyone. I will just go over a little bit about our program before we start. So the Care for Caregivers program is brought to you by a collaboration by Safe Care BC and the Canadian Mental Health Association with funding from the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. And before we begin or go any further, I want to take a quick minute. I know we're all in a virtual platform, but I wanted to do a land acknowledgement. So I want to start by recognizing that we are gathered on the ancestral unceded territories of First Nations, Inuits, and Métis people across British Columbia. And I just want to acknowledge that we are thankful for being allowed to share this territory and do our good work. If you would like to share where you're from and you're allowed an acknowledgement in the chat, we'd be very happy to hear that and share that. Next is a little bit about our facilitator. I'll just do a brief intro and I'll allow her to introduce herself. So our facilitator for this session is Mike Harnett, and she is the president of Solaris Fatigue Management, a consulting firm that optimizes healthier work and performance. A very interesting and informative. I had a chat with her prior to this starting this webinar series with her, and just so much information. I'm really excited for all you guys to hear everything she has to say and all the knowledge that she has. And I will just turn it over. I will stop sharing my screen. And hi, so I see there's a couple other issues in the chat, but I will just turn it over to Mike. Mike, if you'd like to share your screen and get started, I will resolve the technical issues as they come up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm just getting my screen to, there we go. That's what we wanted to see. It's always a pleasure to speak with people in the healthcare sector. And I think right off the bat, we have to acknowledge that in our challenging 24/7 society that we're facing right now, especially when it's ruled by pandemics and staff shortages and public expectations, which often, quite frankly, are excessive and unrealistic, many of you are on the brink. Stress and fatigue are persistent, and providing strategies to you is really long overdue. But I first want to review why we're even here. So it isn't like the healthcare field didn't already have enough stress to deal with prior to COVID. In fact, back in 2018, there was a wonderful study that was done that revealed that healthcare shift workers, for the most part, 41% of them, 41%, were actually found to have a sleep disorder, and another 22% screened positive for depression and anxiety. So this is prior to COVID really hitting us. It's only gotten worse since that time. Now, digging further into this particular study, we found that those that were determined to have sleep disorders also had an 83% increase in adverse safety outcomes. So what does that mean? It means that there was things like more needle stick injuries, not with the patient, but with the person, more motor vehicle collisions on the drive home after work, more near misses in terms of patient care. So for example, missing a diagnosis or giving the wrong medication or giving the wrong dosage of medication. And for those who were suffering more on the depression anxiety side, they saw an increased risk of 63% for adverse safety outcomes. So it's not enough that we're hurting other individuals in our care or perhaps putting them at risk, but we're also hurting ourselves by just having too much of a workload, whether it's at work or combined with our home life. So let's see what we can do to help you out. I want to start off very simply talking about what exactly fatigue is, because there's a lot of misunderstandings. And fatigue is not the same as sleepiness, tiredness, drowsiness. Those terms, drowsy, tired, sleepy, those are symptoms of fatigue. They are not fatigue. What fatigue is an actual physiological state. So what I mean by that is we actually have products, fatigue-related byproducts that are laying down in our body and our brain when fatigue is present. So it's an actual substance. And this fatigue is going to result in us having a decreased capacity in order to perform either physically or mentally, and in fact, affect us even emotionally. And all of this is going to translate into an impairment of our abilities. So it's going to affect our health, our alertness, and certainly our ability to safely perform our duties. Okay, so now that we know what fatigue is, let's talk about fatigue impairment. And you may have heard this term. So fatigue impairment is all about the impact on the brain. So many of you are probably aware of this. We have this very important section at the beginning or the front end of our brain in the frontal lobe. It's called the prefrontal cortex. We also refer to this as the executive control center. And the reason we call it that is because not only is it the primary function that gives us reason and logic, but it's also responsible for directing traffic to other portions of the brain. So it's going to direct traffic and tell the motor cortices what to do and the sensory cortices what to do. So it's going to impact everything that our brain is instructing the rest of our body to do. So here's the thing. When we have a buildup of these fatigue-related products, it leads to impairment because the brain goes in search, or not the brain, but the whole body goes in search of shutting down the biggest energy hogs that we have when we're tired. And guess what that is? It's the prefrontal cortex. It's our biggest energy hog. So when we are tired and fatigued, especially in the brain, then it's going to pull back and it shuts down that prefrontal cortex, which also means it's shutting down other portions of the brain. So that is a state of fatigue impairment and why we can't function as well as when we're well rested. Okay, that's the baseline information. Here's what we're going to talk about today for the most part. I want to focus on sleep-related fatigue. There is fatigue as a consequence of the tasks that you do. There's burnout and those types of things that are related to fatigue, but I really want to concentrate today in the time that we have on the sleep issues, because a lot of this is more in your control. So in terms of sleep-related fatigue, every one of us is biologically programmed to require a certain amount of sleep every day. And if we don't get that, we accumulate sleep debt. And every day that you don't get the sleep that you're required to have, then you continue to build sleep debt. Your sleep debt will build and accumulate and accumulate and accumulate to the point where you are definitely going to be at an impaired state at some point. Now, here's the thing about sleep-related fatigue. You cannot Tim Horton it away. You cannot Starbucks it away. You cannot Red Bull it away. Nothing gets rid of those sleep-related products that are laying down in your brain except for sleep. That's the only way to get rid of those products. Otherwise, they just continue to build. What caffeine does is it will temporarily mask the presence of those fatigue products up there, but it's not eliminating them. They're continuing to build, even though you don't notice it in a very brief time that you're having the coffee. But once that coffee wears off, you have now the existing fatigue-related products plus more that have been building up in the background. So sleep is the only answer. Okay, so let's talk about why we have the challenges we do when it comes to sleep. And it all comes down to what we call our sleep-wake cycle. So here's the sciencey part of things. We have two drives in our body every day that kind of direct us as to when we should be alert and functioning and when we should be resting and recuperating. The first is what we call the homeostasis drive. Now, don't panic over the big words. What we're looking at here really is, very simply put, how long you've been awake. So the longer you're awake, the more byproducts are being laid down in your brain, because your brain is actively thinking throughout the day. Even when you're sitting still, it's thinking and processing information, and it's burning off energy, and there's byproducts. One of those byproducts in particular is called adenosine. And this is what's building up sleep pressure in your brain. So much so that by the time you get to around 16, 17 hours, you're probably going to start to feel a little bit drowsy, or, on the verge of saying, man, I'm tired, I got to go to bed. And hopefully what you'll do is you'll go to bed. So if you go to bed, then what happens is during the sleep process, all of these toxic waste products, including the sleep pressure of adenosine, it all gets washed out of the brain. All right. And then when you wake up the next day, you're fresh and ready to go again. But here is the problem. If you don't go to bed after 17 hours and you stay up longer, you're depositing more and more of these toxins in your brain. And the more you deposit those toxins in, the more the prefrontal cortex shuts down and goes into that impaired state. And what does that mean in terms of risk? Well, it means risk is going up substantially, both in terms of health risks as well as performance risks. Okay, so that's the first thing we have to worry about, the homeostasis drive. The second drive that we have is the circadian drive, and this is our alertness drive, and this is all controlled by sunlight. So every day we are what's regarded as a diurnal species, meaning we are day-oriented. That means we are meant to get up with the sun, and as the sun rises, we become more and more functional at the top of our game. Everything is great. We have a little dip in the afternoon, and we all go through this circadian dip. It's not because of what you eat, although what you eat can make it worse. But we are all going to have a little dip in the afternoon at some point. But then we rebound and we start to feel good again into the early evening hours, or depending on what season it is, it might be a little bit earlier or a little bit later, depending on how long the sun is in the sky. Now, when the sun goes down, that's when melatonin starts to be produced. Now, melatonin is your natural sleep hormone. It's what helps you fall asleep and stay asleep. So as the sun goes down and darkness arrives, melatonin starts to be produced. So now we've lost the alertness effect of the sun, and our body is saying, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. And hopefully this is going to be at the same time that the sleep pressure is built up, and we're going to go to bed and we wake up refreshed the next day. Unless you work through the night. Now, if you're somebody who's up at nighttime, then you're combating two things: the lack of sunlight, which drives your alertness, and the fact that you have melatonin telling you to go to sleep. So anybody who's trying to work during nighttime hours is always going to be at higher risk compared to somebody who's doing the same job during daytime hours. We are not a nocturnal species. We are designed to do our best work during the bright daytime hours and get our best quality and quantity of sleep during the deep, dark nighttime hours. And God forbid that you've got to have a night shift where you've also been awake for more than 17 hours. Now risk goes through the roof. If you're curious as to how fatigue impaired you are, at 17 hours of wakefulness, just being awake for 17 hours, you are now the blood alcohol equivalent of 0.05% impairment. If you've been awake for 20 hours, you're closer to 0.08. And if you've been awake for 24 hours, you're at 0.10 blood alcohol equivalency. In particular, the critical period is between 2 and 6 a.m. This is when we are at our functional worst. And this is when things can really go wrong. All right, that's all we need to know about risk at this point. Now let's get into our circadian rhythms a little bit more. So our circadian rhythms are controlled by our daytime cycle. So circa refers to about a day, or the 24-hour rotation of our planet. And during that 24-hour period, we have exposure to sunlight and darkness. Now, what happens is, and this is something we didn't even know about until 15 years ago, we have these photon receptors in our eyes that are very, very powerful at detecting the amount of light in our environment. If you want to know how powerful they are, if you were to close your eyes right now and wave your hand up and down in front of your face, you would likely see, you would likely see changes in light. And that's because the thin membrane of your eyelid does nothing to really block out all of the light that's around you. So This is a really important feature. What happens is the eyes pick up the amount of light in our environment, and that will take the message and send it to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the center of the brain, but we're just going to call it the master clock. Now, this master clock is being told by the eyes what time of day it is based on the amount of light that it's receiving. And it's going to take that information and it's going to share it with all the peripheral clocks in our body. We have peripheral clocks throughout our system, in all of our tissues, all of our organs, even our musculoskeletal system. So what you can think of here is consider that the master clock is the conductor and this is a symphony. And the conductor is trying to keep everybody in harmony with each other, everybody operating on the same time frame. And that's really what the circadian rhythms are all about, working in harmony together. When we are desynchronized because we think it's the wrong time of day because of light exposure at the wrong time, then what happens is these clocks will all become desynchronized. That desynchronization introduces the disease state into our body. Okay, so the most powerful synchronizer we have is light, and in particular, sunlight. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. There's another thing that we can do to help stabilize and keep these rhythms in sync with each other. And that's by having a very, very structured and consistent routine in our lives. So when you have light exposure, when you eat, when you go to bed, when you exercise, when you socialize, the more consistent your routines are in your lifestyle, the stronger the harmony and connection between all of these rhythms so that they don't desynchronize. All right. So very important to recognize consistency in your routines. And if you want to know how important consistency is, just think of if you've ever had a 2-year-old child in your house and you took them out of their sleep routine, what happened to them? And I'm sure a lot of you recognize that they just turn into holy terrors. You can't control them. So that's how important routine is to our lives and to our bodies. Okay. Let's move on now and start talking about melatonin for a moment. So melatonin, I mentioned this is our natural hormone. When we have light at the wrong time, it suppresses production. So we call melatonin the Dracula of hormones because it's only coming out in the absence of light. So for somebody coming off of a night shift, and now they're trying to sleep while the sun is coming up, it suppresses that melatonin. So they can't either fall asleep or they can't sleep as long because they don't have as much melatonin present to help them with that. If we have large amounts of light in the nighttime or evening hours, then that can also prevent us from getting good quality sleep during the nighttime because we don't have enough melatonin. Age will also reduce our production of natural melatonin. So we find that our parents or our grandparents will often take a nap later on in the day to kind of make up for the shortfall during their nighttime sleep. And it's also really important to recognize it as a powerful antioxidant. So what that means is melatonin will go in and mop up all of the free radicals that are in our system. So free radicals are those things that we're exposed to every day in our environment, things like pesticides that might be on our food or pollutants in the air, or if you bought a new couch, maybe it's the off-gassing coming from the couch. So this is really important because melatonin helps to mop these up and prevents the attack on our DNA. And that is how it prevents cancer. So how do I make sure I have enough of my own natural melatonin in my system? Well, if you want to boost your melatonin, you have to make sure you have a good source of serotonin. So serotonin is what gets synthesized into melatonin. So we call serotonin one of our feel-good hormones, right? It's the one that gives us sensations of joy and pleasure and makes us a nice, happy person to be around. Unfortunately, people who have erratic schedules or lifestyles, or those who work shift work, or those who work in enclosed work environments where they don't have exposure to sunlight or dark environments, they have significantly reduced levels of serotonin. As a result, you're cranky, irritable, miserable people that we just don't want to hang out with. And you might know a few people like that. And it might explain maybe perhaps why you're that way sometimes. Okay, so we need to have serotonin in our system so that it can convert to melatonin so we can fall asleep. Well, how do I boost my serotonin if I don't seem to have enough? All right, we got to take another step back. It all comes down to tryptophan. Now, a lot of you may think of tryptophan as the turkey drug, right? But you know, that's kind of sad because there's actually more tryptophan in pork than there is in turkey. It's just that when we traditionally have a big turkey meal, it's a big meal. And there's lots of other foods that also have tryptophan. And then we go into a food coma right after. But tryptophan is a very important ingredient in our diet. If you have a healthy diet where you have good proteins, lean meats, dairy, fish, whole grains, and quinoa, all those are great sources of tryptophan. If you eat a lot of processed foods, you're probably going to lack some of the tryptophan that you need. Okay, so now you have tryptophan in your diet. How do we get tryptophan into serotonin? We got to go outside. We got to get some sunlight. It has to be sunlight. And to put this into perspective, sunlight on a bright sunny day in summertime is going to be anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 lux of light. Compare that to the room you're probably sitting in right now, where at a maximum, you're probably around 300 lux of light. So 50,000 to 300, that's a big drop, okay? So we need you to get out into sunlight. Now, we need to go out into the sun, and you've probably noticed this. You may have kind of felt groggy or just not in a good mood, and all of a sudden you walk outside and you have this immediate boost in your mood. That is how quickly serotonin can synthesize itself from tryptophan in your stomach. Then, once we have all the serotonin in our system, at nighttime, when the sun goes down, that serotonin is converted into melatonin, and now we get a good night's sleep. So this, in essence, is your 24-hour day. Eat the right foods, go get some sunlight, and then you'll have a good sleep at night. Okay, first lesson learned. Now, let's talk about quantity of sleep. We just talked a lot about quality. Now we want to talk about quantity. So in terms of how we're struggling these days with getting the amount of sleep we need, it's due to the fact that we're constantly battling throughout our day to balance our sleep with our work and our family and recreation period. And in our busy world, what will we constantly cut back on? Well, we won't cut back on work because we need the money. We won't cut back on family and friends because they'll disappear on us. So we tend to keep cramming more in at the expense of going to bed like we used to. So much so that we used to average, over 100 years ago, we used to average more than 9 hours of sleep. And now we're averaging less than 7 hours of sleep. Excuse me. And we can blame this guy for all of our problems. He manufactured daylight. It used to be, prior to the light bulb being invented, we got up when the sun got up, and we went down when the sun went down. And there was nothing for us to do in the dark except procreate. And we don't even do that well anymore. But then he invented the light bulb. And now we can stay up later and later and later into the evening hours and cram more and more into our day at the expense of going to bed like we used to, and at the expense of not getting the recuperative sleep like we used to. So how much is enough? This is the big question. The reality is, science is very, very clear on this. Every adult requires somewhere between 7 to 9 hours of recuperative sleep every 24 hours, okay? A minimum of 7 to 9 hours. That's what we need to offset any health outcomes. Now, a lot of us aren't getting that, especially those in the healthcare field. We find that typically people who are shift workers or have high stress jobs are getting less sleep, especially if you then add in caregiving activities at home, and maybe you're caregiving both young families and elderly people at home. So we're seeing on average 2 hours less sleep for these individuals. That may not be surprising to you. Okay, can we adapt ourselves to get by on less sleep than what we've been programmed for? Well, the quick answer to this is no. You cannot change what you've been biologically programmed for, all right? And you've been programmed for somewhere between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So when you start cutting back on your sleep, anyone who only gets 4 hours of sleep, for example, the next day you'll have uncontrolled microsleeps. So an uncontrolled microsleep is where you fall asleep, but you don't even know you've fallen asleep, and you don't even recognize that you're about to fall asleep. And bad things can happen under those conditions. But it doesn't take just one day of only 4 hours of sleep. If you go several days in a row with less than 6 hours of sleep, same thing can happen. Now, that's affecting performance. On the health side, when you don't get the sleep you require, it accelerates the aging process. All right. In fact, there is nothing more important to your overall health and longevity than sleep. Not what you eat, not what you drink. In fact, not even whether or not you exercise. The most recent literature is very clear to state that if you're somebody who gets up early in the morning to fit in exercise at the expense of cutting back on your sleep, you may want to rethink your priorities. Now, don't take that out of context. I'm not saying don't exercise. We all need to exercise. That's very, very critical for our overall health. But don't sacrifice sleep for exercise. Either go to bed early to make up for that or cut out something else. All right. Okay, so let's talk about why sleep is so important and why you need that amount. It comes down to the fact that we have different stages that we have to rotate throughout the night or throughout our sleep period. So the first stages we're going to talk about are the non-REM sleep stages, and in particular, stages 1 and 2. We consider these the light stages of sleep. Stage 1 only lasts about 5 to 10 minutes, so I'm just kind of combining it with stage 2. So here's where you put your head on the pillow, you close your eyes, and hopefully you begin to drift off pretty quickly. At this point, your brain waves are slowing down, your muscles relax, your breathing, heart rate, pulse, everything begins to drop. This is the period, especially as you transition into stage 2, that any new learnings that you had throughout the day begin to be integrated with any old learnings that are of a similar nature. So it's a very important period for that. It's also very important for consolidating any new biomechanical skills that we have learned. When you're in stages 1 and 2, it's very easy to wake up from these stages. And this is where I get to temporarily throw my ex-husband under the bus. And I'm only saying this because I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to husband bash here, because we're actually very good friends to this day. And he knows that I use him as an example, but it's a great example. So I would see him come home after a hard day on the golf course, and he would sit on the couch. And a few minutes later, eyes are closed, head's leaning back, maybe a little bit of drool out the corner of his mouth. And if I came by to remove that remote control from his hand, what do you think would happen? He would immediately pop up and say, "Hey, no, I'm watching that." And he would deny that he was even asleep, when in fact he actually was. And, you know, it's figure skating on. I don't think he was watching it. But that being said, it's very easy if we are disturbed in a light sleep stage within the first 20, 30, 40 minutes of our sleep period, it's easy to wake up, get our bearings about us, and jump back into whatever we have to do. But everything changes if we continue to sleep, because then we're going to drop into stage 3. This is our deep recuperative delta sleep stage. Delta referring to long, slow brain waves. So the brain is actually quieting down at this point as much as it can, while the body goes into hyperactive repair mode. And that's because this is the only time the human growth hormone is released in the body. And the human growth hormone is responsible for all of the physical maintenance and repair of all of our organs and tissues, our musculoskeletal system, and perhaps most importantly, our immune system. So we need to get good, deep quality sleep to make sure that we can fight off some of the exposures we have on a daily basis, especially for you in the healthcare field. The other thing that goes on during stage 3, a very critical function, this is when the brain is cleansed. So you remember all that fatigue debris I was talking about laying down, you know, all those byproducts. One person referred to it as brain poop. So we can call it brain poop if you like. And this is the toilet flushing mechanism. So what happens during stage 3 is the brain will actually shrink a little bit in size. And that allows for these glial cells to be brought up to the cerebral spinal fluid surrounding the brain, where all of the debris, all the brain poop is situated. And the glial cells will pop out into that cerebral spinal fluid and mop up all of the debris, all of the brain poop out there, and flush it down to the liver. So critical that we reach stage 3 for that. Then our long-term memory is also consolidated during this sleep phase. The challenge with stage 3 sleep, because it's so deep, it's very hard to wake up from this stage. And you may have actually experienced it if all of a sudden you're in a deep sleep and an alarm goes off, like the smoke detector goes off in your house. And you wake up in this state of complete grogginess and disorientation, and you think to yourself, what's going on? Who are you? Why am I here? I don't understand. And that we call sleep inertia. So sleep inertia is going to last, once we've woken up out of a deep sleep, it's going to last anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. So that can really linger and affect our performance capabilities during that phase. Okay, now we've gone through all the non-REM sleep stages. Finally, we're going to hit REM sleep. So REM sleep is stage 4. And this is a complete reversal from stage 3. This is where now the body is effectively paralyzed while the brain kicks into high gear. So what's going on during this phase? Well, it means it's the primary cognitive repair. Not is it only going to restore all of our mental functions, it's also going to restore our emotional tolerances. So it's critical for our psychological well-being as well. So in this period, it's the critical time for our short-term memory to also be consolidated. So people who don't get enough REM sleep, they're going to be, again, more cranky, more irritable. They're going to be forgetting a lot of things, and they're just not going to be happy people, all right? And they're going to struggle. Okay, so now we know what the different stages are doing. Now we have to understand how they actually play out. So here's what we're going to look at. Let's assume you're having an 8-hour sleep period. So that's 8 hours across the bottom here. You put your head on the pillow and you close your eyes and hopefully you drift off to sleep. So you're going to start off drifting off into stage 1 non-REM, stage 2 non-REM. Those are your light sleep stages. And then you're going to drop down into your deep, deep delta sleep stages down here. And then you rebound up, 3, 2, 1, boom, you hit REM sleep. So one lap or sleep cycle is going to last about 90 minutes in total. Okay. So this is where it's very important, because with each sleep cycle, you actually spend different ratios of time in the phases. So for example, your first 4 hours of sleep is when you're going to get most of your deep quality sleep, your delta brainwave sleep, okay? So this is really important to understand. We have a rule when it comes to anybody, especially as a shift worker. You don't want anybody to disrupt your first 4 hours of sleep. Those are critical hours of sleep. That means nobody gets into the bedroom to wake you up unless their hair is on fire, okay? You need to lay down the law. Now, the longer you sleep, the more you transition away from delta sleep and you spend more and more time in REM sleep. So that's your cognitive and emotional repair period. So if you're somebody who's cutting your sleep short and you're only getting, let's say, 6 hours of sleep, what kind of sleep are you cutting out the most? REM sleep. So you're probably going to be a lot more stressed, a lot more cranky, a lot more irritable, and having a lot of memory problems. Now, you'll notice these little blips up here. Those refer to waking episodes, and those waking episodes just represent, you're turning over in bed or something along that line. And most of us will have lots of little waking episodes throughout the night that we don't even notice. But if you do wake up and you can't fall back asleep, there could be a variety of reasons for that. It could be because you have a sleep disorder. It could be because you maybe had something to drink. It could be a variety of reasons. If you're somebody who wakes up to go to the bathroom, the last thing you want to do is start turning on lights, okay? So a really good solution to that is if you want to go to the bathroom, you don't want to break a leg or stub a toe, have a night light close to the ground in the bathroom or in the hallway, not in the bedroom, in the bathroom or the hallway. Or even better yet, you can run strip lights underneath your bathroom counter that are motion activated. The last thing you want is any kind of light that is going to be at eye level, such as a lamp on your nightstand. Don't turn that on. Don't turn on an overhead light. Light should be out of the bedroom and low to the ground. Okay, what happens if we don't get the sleep we require? Well, there are numerous consequences. First are the physical health effects. We're not going to have time to go through all of these. Suffice it to say, there is significant evidence that when you get less than 7 hours of sleep, there are consequences. If you get less than 6, they become much more significant. All right. In terms of mental health effects, everything from becoming more aggressive, intolerant, impulsive, more mood swings, more irrational behavior, increases in depression and PTSD. This is an interesting one. If you encounter a traumatic event, and you have had a good night's sleep versus your person beside you who had a really poor sleep, who do you think is going to get PTSD first? It's going to be the person who had the poor sleep because they didn't restore their emotional tolerances. There are links to poor sleep or circadian disruptions that are tied to bipolarism, schizophrenia, dementias, and Alzheimer's disease. Remember when I talked about the brain poop being flushed out? Well, there are two byproducts or proteins that are considered brain poop up there. One is called tau and one is called amyloid beta. These two will, if they're not flushed out every day by not getting a good sleep, what'll happen is they'll start to lay down on top of each other and form plaque, preventing the neurons from firing in the brain, or they'll actually tangle up the neurons, tie them in knots, and prevent them from firing. That is Alzheimer's disease. And then we have performance effects, and it affects you in so many ways, from not recognizing existing hazards that are around you, to having to spend more time on a task, to underestimating risk, poor problem solving. Our visual perception is dramatically affected. We have poor hand-eye coordination, we lose depth perception, we aren't as clear with our spatial awareness, definitely slowed information processing, reduced reaction times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all kinds of ways that we're being affected by fatigue, and in particular, lack of sleep or disruption of our circadian rhythms. So this ties us back to the stress aspect. And for the longest time, we thought that stress was our primary source of insomnia and sleeplessness, when in fact now we know through a much better understanding of sleep neurobiology, it's actually initiated because of lack of sleep. In other words, when we don't get a good night's sleep, it lowers our emotional tolerances, and what should be just a routine event becomes much more dire in our opinion. And that comes back to this prefrontal cortex. So when our brain is well rested, the prefrontal cortex has a really good relationship and helps to manage our stress response center, our emotional center. This is the amygdala. So they communicate back and forth, and the prefrontal cortex uses reason and logic to help you put things into perspective. But a tired brain doesn't have that communication going on anymore. So instead, what is feeding the amygdala? Well, it's the most primitive part of the brain called the locus coeruleus, and it actually accentuates all of our emotions. So what may have been something very, very simple that you could have worked through using reason and logic now becomes over-analyzed, over-dramatic. You overreact to it, and it blows things out of proportion, all because you're tired. And this is going to affect your communications and your relationships, both at work and, more importantly, at home with the people that are really important to you. All right, so how do we fix all of this? Well, let's get into some sleep strategies for you. First and foremost, you want to have a good bed. The engineering behind beds these days is ridiculous. The trend, however, is to lean towards memory foam beds. And while these may feel comfortable when you go and lie down in them in the store, memory foam, even the newer ones, memory foam is really bad at trapping heat. And heat is not your friend when you're trying to sleep. It will wake you up and take you out of the deeper levels of sleep. So some of the memory foam beds now are being punctuated with little holes in them to increase airflow. Some of them actually have a gap with some pocket coil springs underneath them. Those are helping, but they still, when you compare a memory foam bed to a traditional mattress, they are going to warm up a lot faster and a lot more. So if you are a hot sleeper, anyone who's going through menopause, memory foam may not be your friend. Now, there is another type of memory foam, which is really latex. Latex is much cooler, and actually you sleep higher on the latex. You don't drop as far down like you do with the memory foam, which is actually good, because the deeper you sink into the memory foam, the more effort it takes you to turn over in the middle of the night, which also causes you a higher risk of waking up. So latex foam is an actual advantage over memory foam, but it is a lot more expensive. All right. You can also buy bedding that will help to facilitate cooling. I know that right now there's a lot of you that think, oh my God, the higher the thread count, the better, because it just feels so wonderful and silky. And yeah, it may feel really great when you first climb into bed, but the higher the thread count, the poorer the airflow. So again, if you're a hot sleeper or you're sleeping on a memory foam mattress, you may not want to go with a high thread count sheet. You want something a little bit cooler. You can buy pillows that, again, for women in particular, when you're going through menopause, one of the things that will help you with hot flashes is to cool down your neck region. So you can get pillows that have the cool gel in them that will hit those vessels that are close to the surface on the sides of your neck and help to drive down your body temperature. Light. Let's talk about light now. No light, absolutely no light when you're in the bedroom. Okay, you want to get rid of that as quickly as possible. So remove or cover all sources of light. That includes alarm clocks, phones, any chargers you have, any power sources that might be in there. I had to put a little sticker on my smoke detector because the light was just mocking me in the middle of the night. And TV. I know getting the TV out of the bedroom could cause a divorce in some circumstances, but there's two things wrong with a TV. First, of course, is the light factor. And it's not a steady state of light, it's a flickering light. So if you're trying to fall asleep while the TV is on, your brain, sure, you may fall asleep, but you're going to hover in the light levels of sleep. You're not going to drop into the deeper levels until that TV is gone and turned off. So when you're hovering in those lighter levels, it's because your brain knows that something is changing in the environment. And so it's always programmed to look out for threats. So as that light is flickering, it's going, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And it won't release you and let you go to the deeper levels of sleep. The same thing with the sound. The sound isn't a steady state of sound. It's a changing state. And if a commercial comes on, then it gets really loud and then it goes back down again. So the brain keeps saying, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And it won't release and let you drop down. Now, if you can't get the TV out of the room because you will get a divorce, well, in that case, then if you're the one trying to sleep, make sure that you at least have an eye mask to block out the light. And the person who's watching the TV should have headphones on so that it's not disturbing you. You also want to use heavy blackout drapery. There is no such thing as a good amount of light in your room. No light is the best amount of light in your room. Now, I'm saying heavy blackout drapery, not blackout blinds. Blackout blinds actually let light pollution in around the edges or between the slats. When you mount the drapery, you should mount it outside of the frame so that it blocks as much light pollution as possible. Valances will help as well across the top to help block out more pollution coming in from lights outside of the house. You want to turn technology down at night for a couple of reasons. The first being a wonderful study that was done by Dr. Charles Eisler out of Harvard. And what he did was he was looking at people who read a book, traditional book, versus people who read off of an iPad. And here's what he found the very next day. He found that those who read off the iPad produced 55% less melatonin. It took them 10 minutes longer to fall asleep. They had less REM sleep during the night. And the next day they had that lingering sleep inertia where they were groggy and couldn't get their wits about them for several hours. All because they were viewing technology. All of our handheld technology, not even just our handheld, but all of our technology is backlit with blue LED. And that's to optimize visual acuity with the screen. The problem, though, is that there's a particular stream of blue light that suppresses our melatonin production. So if you haven't done this already, you need to pick up your phone and you need to go into the settings for your display and you need to activate the blue light filter. And that blue light filter will pick up where you are, what time of day it is, and it will say, oh, it's 7 o'clock at night. I'm going to start to activate the blue light filter. And what it does is it will prevent the blue light from coming at you, and you'll see your screen begin to change a little bit to a pinkish or orangish hue. And you can actually set how much of a filter you want on there, but the more the better. So that's one way to help you get a better sleep because you're not suppressing your melatonin production. Now, the other thing is just to turn down the overall light of the device itself as well. So dim the light as well. And these are automatic settings that you can activate within your phones and your other handheld devices. You also want to limit technology at night because it is designed to intrinsically reward you by giving you blasts of dopamine every time a notification, a buzz, a signal, a beep, anytime any of those go off, you get this blast of dopamine into your system that is a reward, and you want to keep on attaching yourself to it. And if you want to know how good technology is at doing this to you, here's a couple of quotes for you. So they know what they're doing. They are setting up your devices and how they set up their notifications, how they set up their links to, you finish reading one article and then all of a sudden they're flashing a link here, look at this one, look at this one. It's got more information that you're going to want to see. The way they've designed them, they're preventing us from turning them off, putting them down and going to sleep. If you can't move your phone out of the bedroom at nighttime, maybe you use it as your alarm clock, make sure that you have all the notifications turned off during the night and have it face down. You want to limit evening light before you go to bed. Now, there's two things that you have to consider here. One is the intensity of the light and one is the proximity. From an intensity perspective, put your lamps or your overhead lights on dimmer switches. Lamps are always preferable to overhead lighting. And the proximity of the light is also really important. So for example, if you are watching a movie and you choose to watch it on your phone versus watching it on a big screen TV, the impact of having that technological device so close to your face, the impact is so much more significant than if you were to watch it on that big screen TV that's across the room. So think about this when you think about your kids, because they're looking at their phones constantly or their tablets, and they've got them under the covers in bed at night, Snapchatting, Instagramming, watching Netflix, doing whatever. And it's forcing them to stay awake because of the blue light aspect and also because of the built-in intrinsic reward system that it's giving them. So you need to do some education with them and activate those filters in their phones. Get sunlight, and not just any sunlight. Morning light is the best because it keeps us in sync with the planet. So 15 minutes in the early morning is always preferable to the late afternoon. In fact, 15 minutes in the morning is equal to 2 hours in the late afternoon. So early morning sun is the best. Now, we live in a place where there's often not a lot of sunlight in the wintertime. So in those situations, there are light therapy devices that are available. You can get light boxes, which is often used for people with diagnosed depressive disorders. So the intent is that these light boxes will replicate sunlight because they'll have about 10,000 lux of light in them. And you just set them up beside you. You don't look at them. It's not like, you're not going to stare at the sun. You're not going to stare directly at these. And depending on how close it is to you will dictate how long you need to have it on. And you get all that information when you purchase these devices. The other option, and this is something that I use, in fact, I even have a pair here, and I don't know if anybody actually is seeing me on screen, but if you are, I am putting on the exact same glasses that this individual has here. And what they are, we call them glasses, but there's no glass in them at all, actually. It's just a light that is directly focusing in on your eyes, and it's replicating the same kind of light that we would get from early morning sunlight. So I put these on in the morning, in the wintertime in particular, to help wake me up because I'm a night owl. I struggle with early mornings for the most part. And of course, in the wintertime out here, we just don't get enough sunlight a lot of times in the lower mainland. No disruptions when you're trying to sleep. And this, is kind of logical, right? You want to block out all noise. So maybe you just throw on some earplugs. You also want to eliminate disturbances. This means educating your family and friends as to when it's okay to reach out to you, to buzz you, to text you, and when it is not. That may mean posting a little clock on your bedroom door that says, I'm sleeping until this time, do not come in. It could mean sending out notifications via email or text messaging, say, hey, this is my sleep period. Please don't reach out to me during this time frame. But there's ways that you can get your family and friends on board. And you can cover up noise, especially if you have traffic noise outside, or if the person beside you happens to be a snorer. Fans are a really good way to help mask some of that noise. Some other things you may not have thought about. So many of us have hardwood floors or ceramic tile in places. So your high traffic areas, make sure you've got some carpeting laid down or some rugs to absorb that sound so that the person trying to sleep isn't being woken up by people running in and out on the hardwood. In addition to that, you have to start looking after your pets. So trim their toenails. Cats and dogs across the hardwood and the ceramic can be very, very loud. And you might want to make a no shoes rule for the house. Again, just to keep down the noise aspect for the person who's trying to sleep. The biggest concern, though, is when I have people telling me constantly, how do I shut off my brain? How do I stop my mind from racing? Well, let's think about first why your brain is racing. That's the more important part. And a lot of it is because you're simply cramming either too much into your day and you're overwhelmed, or you just have too much stress going on in your life and you're not managing it well. In either scenario, you're going to struggle to fall asleep, especially if you've been busy all day long, and then when you finally go to bed and that thing you didn't want to think about, or those things you avoided during the day, well, guess what? All the other distractions are gone now, and your brain is going to be very quick to remind you, hey, you forgot about this, or you haven't thought about this yet. And now that those distractions are gone, here's a good time to think about it because you're sitting still for a moment. Well, that's going to create some problems for you. There are ways to help handle this. One is to first build in some time throughout the day to give your brain a break. All right, just sit still, take some deep breaths. Meditation, those are really great strategies. So deep breathing is really important because the best way to get stress out of the body is to get oxygen into the body. And as soon as you take a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, you'll immediately begin to feel the muscles relax in your neck and shoulder region. And that's going to carry out through all those systems in your body. Meditation is a great way to calm a racing mind. It takes a little bit of practice, but there's all kinds of apps that are out there that can help you through that process. Yoga is another proven strategy to help encourage good quality sleep. And yoga, for the most part, is based on these same principles. Deep breathing is involved, some meditative qualities are involved, along with some gentle stretching in most cases. And of course, one of the biggest ones that I endorse is called journaling. And what this is, there's a lot of scientific evidence behind this. And what it is, it's where you actually bring out, you don't have to buy a fancy journal. It can just be a pad of paper, but you write down right before you go to bed, right before you turn off the lights, you write down everything that's on your mind and just get it onto paper. You don't have to solve any of your problems, just write it down. And then your brain will acknowledge your effort that you've spent some time addressing it, and it will release it and let you fall asleep. And it's very, very effective. If you wake up in the middle of the night and your brain is racing, reach over, grab a pen that's on your nightstand and start scribbling on a piece of paper. You don't have to turn on the light. You don't even have to be able to read what you're writing the next day, but just the act of putting the pen to paper and getting it off of your brain helps to release those nagging thoughts. And of course, there's all kinds of sleep apps out there that are available as well. The only caution I make is that if you turn to a sleep app, you don't want that sleep app, whether it's a waterfall sound or something else, somebody talking you into deep breathing and meditation. You don't want it running all night. The longest it should be is 20 to 30 minutes. If you're not asleep after 20 to 30 minutes, then it's not working for you. And if you are still tossing and turning after 20 to 30 minutes, and now you start doing one of those where you look at the clock and think, oh my God, only 5 more hours. Oh, only 3 more hours. Oh, only 2 more hours. The more you do that, the more you're releasing cortisol into your system and increasing your alertness levels. So you're not going to be able to fall asleep. So if you are tossing and turning after 20 to 30 minutes, get out of bed, Go find a nice quiet place to sit down, maybe watch a little TV or read a book, do something calm. And when you're finally tired again, where you can't keep your eyes open, then go back to bed. You'll have a much better chance at getting some sleep as opposed to no sleep. And when it comes to coffee, people don't use it correctly. You need to use it smartly. What that means is use it when you need it. For people who just drink it out of habit, then you've already lost a lot of the alertness effect. And if you're using coffee to help you through those periods when you're really drowsy, they're not going to work for you. And anything beyond 2 to 3 cups of coffee. Now, when I say cups of coffee, 2 cups of coffee is referring to like the 6-ounce cup of coffee. So a large Tim Hortons or a Grande Starbucks, those are actually 2 cups of coffee in one. So if you have more than 2 of those size drinks in a day, you're no longer getting any alertness effect at all. All you're doing is adding a jittery effect to your body and your system. And too much coffee just isn't good for you either. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes for the caffeine to take effect, but it will also stay in your system for up to 6 hours. So you want to cut back on coffee 5 to 6 hours before you go to bed. And most importantly, routine, routine, routine. When you eat, when you exercise, when you socialize, when you go to bed, and when you wake up, be consistent with your routine. And that will really help you in the long run to keep on a regular time frame with your body. All right. At the end of the day, you're in a role as a caregiver. And we know inherently that caregivers are going to be those ones who put themselves on the line for others constantly. And what do? You put the cape on at work, you put the cape on at home, and you show up and you're Batman or you're Wonder Woman or you're Spider-Man. You are the superhero because that's how people view you. But in reality, here's who's showing up. There's a big difference. We need to start giving sleep its respect that it deserves. So I encourage you all to start improving your sleep habits as much as you can. All right, that's it for me. I would love to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you so much. That was so informative. And I did see a question and someone with a raised hand come through. So the first question was, is white light therapy as effective as sunlight?
I guess it depends on what you're describing as white light therapy. White light just means that it has all of the light sources, including blue light, which is exactly the same as sunlight. It depends on the intensity of the light that you have and how you're using it. So light therapy, like a light therapy box, which predominantly is a white light therapy box. Yes, they're very good for people that are suffering from lack of serotonin in particular.
Okay, and then Alan Lee raised your hand. So would you like to share your question, or you could type it out and I can share it for you if you still have a question? Sorry. Okay. Did a new question come in? Oh, there's another question. Oh, they're just saying thank you. Oh, no problem. Alan, if you have a question, you can type it in. I actually have a question. So a lot of the times I'm a mom of 2 and like I'm always struggling to get sleep. So some days if my husband's off, I'm like, oh, I'm going to sleep in and catch up. Is there such a thing? Like, but actually what I feel like the days that I take longer than 6 hours of sleep, or I feel more tired when I wake up. Is that, I'm not sure.
That could in fact be the case. So what happens is if you start to accumulate sleep, we obviously want you to get that 7 to 9 hours in one consolidated block. That is the ideal because you need to go through all those different phases and different ratios of them. However, if you have sleep that built up in you, when you finally get the opportunity, especially if you have a regular routine in your life, when you finally have that opportunity to sleep in, what'll happen is your brain will actually drive you down into the deep sleep stages, and it might even keep you there all night long because you haven't given it enough delta sleep. And then the next night, it'll drive you into REM sleep and keep you there all night long because it wants to make up for that. So your brain tries to repair itself as much as it can, but it can't do that if you have a really erratic lifestyle. It needs to know the pattern, what your sleep patterns are like. Now, when it comes to kids, we know that they're obviously going to impact our sleep for a period of years. However, it should only be a short period of years. It shouldn't be your whole lifespan. So the body is somewhat, the female body is more designed to handle those. I mean, you're going to suffer from lack of sleep, but the long-term consequences will be somewhat dissipated because it is built into our system as females. Now, that being said, if you're going to bed and you're waking up and you're still tired and you've got your 7 to 9 hours in, it could be a couple of things. It could be one, you're waking up in a deep sleep phase, right? So you've got more of that sleep inertia, that hungover kind of feeling. If that's the case, next time you go to bed and you're going to have a longer sleep period, set your alarm for either a half hour earlier or after, and that'll help you to wake up in the light sleep stages or the REM sleep stage, which is your dreamscape, and that's perfectly fine. You just want to avoid waking up in that deep delta sleep stage. Alternatively, if you're always tired, struggling, can't get a good night's sleep, you may have a sleep disorder. We have over 100 sleep disorders, and the majority of people who have sleep disorders are not aware they do. So that may be your next step, is to have a conversation with a clinician.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions that came in around melatonin. What your thoughts are about it as a sleep aid, and how much to start with, or any other supplements that you think might be helpful.
Love this question. First off, I am anti-melatonin, and I will tell you why. There isn't a single sleep society in the world that endorses the use of melatonin because there's too much conflicting and unsupported evidence behind it. More importantly, melatonin is a hormone. And when you take synthetic melatonin, it's being extracted from other plant or animal sources. But here's the thing. Every one of us needs a different amount of melatonin on a day-to-day basis, and we need it at a different time on a day-to-day basis. So a bottle of melatonin that says, take 30 milligrams a half hour before bed, well, that might work for you, but it won't work for the person beside you, or it might have a negative effect on the person beside them. On top of that, in North America, melatonin is not a regulated substance, which means it's being produced in unmonitored labs. And there was a huge study in Canada looking at the consequences of this. And they discovered that they looked at, I believe it was 21 different melatonin products. And when they evaluated the content in these, they ranged anywhere from 68% less melatonin in each pill to 483% more melatonin in each pill, because they're unregulated. So melatonin might work for you today with this pill, but the next day it won't, because it's not the same amount of melatonin. And they often find that the melatonin has been cut with other products. So there's a number of reasons that we don't encourage the use of melatonin. What you need to do, rather than relying on something like that, is figure out why you're struggling with your sleep, and are there other ways that you can improve your sleep habits and your sleep hygiene. Melatonin should be used as a last kind of the last thing you should turn to, and even then it should only be used on an occasional or very infrequent basis. And it should never, I can't stress this enough, never be given to children. Okay, children will have a much higher tendency to have night terrors associated with melatonin. They go through all the same side effects that melatonin does with adults, so stomach and indigestion problems, other grogginess upon waking up, and that lingering sleep inertia. But the most recent literature coming out right now, and there still needs to be more research on this, but preliminary research is indicating that melatonin in kids is influencing their puberty hormones. So even stronger reason not to give that to your children. In terms of other substances that you can take that are proven safe to take and have some efficacy behind them, lavender oil, again, essential oils. You can do lavender on your wrist, a little roller ball of essential oil, or below your nose before you go to bed. And one that's really good is valerian root. There's a lot of scientific evidence behind valerian root. The only thing about valerian root is that it takes time for it to actually build up to where it has an effect on you. So if you're going to try valerian root, you have to commit to it. It's going to take at least 4 weeks for it to build up in your system to where you feel the benefit of it. But they are much safer with little to no side effects.
Thank you so much, Mike. This is something I'm sure all of us could just keep asking you questions, but I'm being mindful of everyone's time. I just want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you, Mike, for sharing all this important information. Sometimes, like you said, we are so focused on taking care of others, we don't focus on ourselves. And this is a great reminder of things that we can do in our everyday routine to help set ourselves up for success so that we're okay and we're taking care of others as well. So thank you so much. To everybody who's messaged me, I will be sharing this on the Care for Caregivers website post webinar. I will be sending out email as well. Please, if you have any other questions, so Mike's contact is here. I will also share that in the post webinar emails that we send out, and on the Care for Caregivers website, there'll be all the information linked there, as well as a quick bio about Mike as well. And thank you so much for attending. I appreciate everyone's time. And there is another webinar again next week. So I hope you're able to join us then. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.